invest in people in the long term, there has to be a mutual understanding.
Hustle hard, hustle hard. Close mouths don't get fed. Thinking strategically, but acting like a gorilla is the kind of marketing that's small. The planet innovates very little, is highly risk averse, and indicates electric, but technology, where is it going? Why is it important? If you're running a tech company, what are some opportunities within the tech industry? How will these opportunities within the tech industry be something that will change the landscape of business in the next 10 years? I mean, powerful conversations that I just don't know that I have the ability to engage in them enough. And I want to allow you to do that. So tonight's chapter specifically is about the technology industry and how it's a little bit different strategically from other industries. So if you were to operate within a organization that is scaling a software or trying to build a new technology and trying to be disruptive, and very similar to the case study we looked at with Zeta Energy, the Zeta battery, how would you then use your resources and competencies differently than somebody in a more established industry, or possibly not utilizing not operating within tech-based company. So let me try to say that a different kind of way. If I was to create a culture within a company that was an entrepreneurial company that got $100 million invested into a new video game concept, that I was going to link, people from different countries to people from the U.S. that spoke totally different languages, but the AI was going to translate their speech, simultaneously. So essentially, I can play, World of Warcraft. That's not a great one, but some of these like shoot 'em up games with people from different countries, and I can hear them in English, and they can hear me in their native language. Let's just say that was a new concept. I just made that up, and I solicited $100 million worth of investment into my business. Now, when I operate and when I strategize within a company like that, the culture that I'm going to build with the first 15 hires, the first 100 hires, maybe the first 150 hires, in the way I'm going to go about managing my company is going to look different than if I was going to acquire a handful of plumbing businesses or a handful of, possibly new startup universities or charter schools or something like that. And I'm sure you can understand why in a tech-based, scaled, venture capital-backed, disruptive technology kind of organization and environment, your strategy has to think in a different kind of way. Your strategy has to be projected in a different kind of way. So that's the essence of what we're going to talk about tonight. So when we think through some of these, hopefully large questions like, what are some of these companies? Do you use some of these companies? Do you think some of these companies are going to standardize over the next 10 years? What is going to be the standard? Is it going to be Gemini, ChatGPT? Is it going to be an electric vehicle? And why? Don't think about it from your personal insight. This is my ask. Think about it from the organization's resources and competencies. I know that sounds like management talk, but by now you should understand what that means. If you're going to say, well, I just like electric vehicles and I think electric vehicles are great, that is not the way in which I want to have the conversation. You can maybe say that the adoption rates of consumers are higher in 2020 than they were in 2010, and it seems that the trend is going in an adoption rate increased direction. I mean, that would be a much better way than saying I like electric cars. Or you say something like the resources that Tesla has been able to gather that has allowed them to build these gigafactories. I just don't see how companies like Ford and GM are going to be able to keep up. Like that would be the kinds of hopefully insights that we can create together in that discussion. So let's try to have at it. With how are these AI companies going to consolidate? Who's going to be the authority when it comes to computing power? It's going to be Microsoft, it's going to be Google, it's going to be Amazon. And these are fun questions to have, or fun conversations to explore. And so intermittently, as I try to do, I want to thrust in the concepts of chapter 11 and what it means to build a standard, how companies need to pivot. And if anybody has taken a class in entrepreneurship, specifically the class that Miami-Dade offers called the Introduction to Lean Startup, this has a lot to do with that. Strategy in the beginning phases of startup companies are make or break, and how you can pivot from one particular customer group to a different customer group could change the trajectory of your company. And I see someone put, what about IBM? I mean, great point about IBM. And one of the fascinating things about IBM is IBM owns a lot of patents that they've had for many, many, many years, and they're continuing to file patents. We'll talk about the value of patents and why patents are important, and if there even is any value to patents, because it turns about 1% of people who own patents actually create economic rents from their patents. So it's like, why do people have patents to begin with? But IBM was able to go into some of these old patents essentially and dust them off and start licensing them out to people. And now they're drawing in about $1 billion a year in revenue just by licensing their patents. So you can see they've found a way to create those economic rents. But one of the fascinating things, I'll stick to IBM for a second, that companies like IBM are capable of doing, which we'll talk about tonight, is they're capable of pivoting. They're capable of learning from failure. They're capable of incentivizing their staff and bringing about, say, the smartest, most intelligent, most ambitious, entrepreneur-minded people in the team and giving them a budget and allowing them to run with that budget. And then maybe I've shared the story about this guy. I think it's Watson, the CEO, came in and told this guy that he failed. He lost the whole project. It was like a $5 million project. And this guy, let's call him Jack, got a visit from the CEO of IBM at the time. I think his name was Watson. And Watson walked in his office, sat down, and said, "Hey, Jack, how you doing?" And this guy's Jack's like, "Not very well. I just lost $5 million, and the project failed. And you know, I'm thinking you're here to fire me." And Watson looked at him and said, "Why would I fire you? I just gave you a $5 million education. Like, there's no shame in failing. Like, this is the kind of thing I want you to do. You're the most expensive employee I have. So keep it up. When are you going to do the next project? How are you going to learn from this lesson?" And that kind of culture and organizational structure and that hierarchy of say a horizontal hierarchy to be able to empower that kind of innovation within a company is needed in tech-based companies. And that's a tough culture and a tough business to create. And the competencies that go along with that, if they're created similar to how we talked about the customer experience and the multiplicity of these customer service representatives that just get it, and how much they can add to their customer experience and the value of the business just basically by understanding customer service. It's the same thing with understanding innovation and creativity and entrepreneurship within an established company. And that's what tech companies do. It's a lot of people. If you read the book that Isaacson wrote on Elon Musk, a great biography, you can see how in the course of 6 or 7 years, this guy was at 15 different companies, and some of them worked and some of them didn't, and he never quit. And I think that's a powerful concept. If you take that persona and you apply that to the general idea and culture within an established organization, how do we get more of that? How do we do more of that? We're going to learn a little bit about that tonight. The first question is, what is different about high tech industries? Where were all industries once high tech? That's a fun question. And number two, it says, what are standards? Why are standards so important in high tech industries? What are the competitive implications of this? We're going to have fun talking about some examples of standards tonight. And number three is, you work for a small company. This is fun. It's like a fable, thing. You work for a small company. Okay, that's most of us. That has the leading position in embryonic market. By now, you know what an embryonic market is. It's a brand new market. It's like the embryo stage. Your boss believes that the company's future is insured because it has, this is a great question, because it has a 60% share of the market. So they're like, "Oh, we're good. We got most of the market. We're fine." Just like Microsoft, Firefox web browser thought. 60% share of the market, the lowest cost structure in the industry, and the most reliable and highest value product. You got some great competencies there for sure. Write a memo to your boss outlining why the assumptions posed might be incorrect. So the boss seems to be, number three is a great one, seems to having a bit hubris about the fact that they have a position in the market and might potentially be getting complacent and not, trying to do some corporate venturing or investing in innovation or creating new ideas or potentially thinking about some outside the industry acquisitions. Also, all things that we'll be talking about tonight. And so you have to convince your boss that clearly is probably making a good amount of money and paying you a good amount of money because that business has a great set of competencies, why his assumptions are incorrect. That's a good one. Natalie, the standard has been now set and it's been sort of crystallized within the industry. Now you're a company within the industry and you want to establish a new standard or you want to make the standard better. Would you want to do that? And what would the implications be of your company pursuing that? Changing the standard. If you see just even the size of a desk or the size of your computer screen, the components within a PC, the space for a dishwasher. I mean, there's standards everywhere, and it's going to be fun talking about tonight. But it's a powerful question, Susan. Maybe we can get back to it. Is it worthwhile if the industry is operating at a particular standard and you're, say, a worthwhile competitor? You're General Electric, and you've been manufacturing refrigerators and dishwashers at this particular size to fit everybody's home within the standard. Should you pursue a type of more efficient, smaller dishwasher or potentially refrigerator that doesn't necessarily fit the standard and try to change the consumer's mindset around the new standard because you believe that you can make waves in that particular space? And so that's a loaded question. It all depends. And I think a lot of it will have to do with your ability to do some consumer research, to gather some information, to build out a marketing plan, to certainly attack. It's almost like a new company to try to create a new standard within an industry. You're going to have to dump resources into that. And the main question would be, do we have the right competencies and the right resources and the right market power to try to go down that path? Tough question to answer. Raphael? This decision to make with a field service software company that I invested in, I had it was a huge investment of time, money, all this kind of stuff. And I chose the one company that was a little bit more risky And we worked for 2 months to build out this software that was going to be utilized on all of our field techs' phones. And I thought it was great software. And about 2 months in, we got word from the guy who's training us. He's like, he cornered me and said, "Listen, Claude, I like you. Feel like you're a nice guy, and I need to tell you this because the CEO of our company, who gave us a rundown of the software, said to him and told him that they're going to go out of business. And essentially, all that time, energy, and effort that I put into, and this is kind of telling Susan that this is true, of training on this particular software, and we totally shot ourselves in the foot. That company was gone, didn't refund us any money. All that time, energy, and effort was wasted. We just went back to the old, say, standard of field service software that we were using for the last 10 years. And we just nixed the project for 2 years and just said, we're just not going to do it. It was a complete waste of time. And I guess, how do you relate that to a consumer tech product? It's sort of the same thing. If you there was a BlackBerry RIM touchpad iPhone that I was thinking about getting, as opposed to switching to the iPhone, and it had a really cool touchpad, and it was trying to mimic the iPhone. Yet the iPhone was supremium. It was supremium. It was superior. It was more premium, and I chose not to get it. But if I had bought that BlackBerry touch phone, within a year they stopped manufacturing them, and RIM went out of business. So I would have eventually adopted the iPhone technology, and it would have been the path down the wrong direction. So you can speak about it from a consumer level. You can speak about it from an organizational level of making important decisions with the tech that you're going to pursue. But then you can also speak about it from an industry level of it. There's an opportunity in this industry to build a business around this particular technology, or should we not? Or should we go this direction instead? I think if you're an early adopter and you're a shrewd early adopter, you're probably more on the benefit side. You're probably the scale is in your favor because you're choosing to do it often, and every once in a while you'll find a product that really makes you more productive. Yet if you're not very intelligent about it and you're just wasteful and not shrewd and discerning and prudent, there's a lot of words of like building wisdom, then yeah, you could waste a ton of money buying new tech that really is useless. And maybe you've seen this in people's houses, or they're just like they're all about the new thing, and 2 months later it doesn't work. I bought a $450 pair of Oculus VR headset. 450 bucks. It's a lot of money for me. And so I was prancing around my house on a Friday night. Please don't picture me prancing with my Oculus headset on in Metaspace, speaking with other people. And my wife is in the other bedroom or the other room, and she's with my daughter. And she comes in and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing? I'm socializing in the metaverse." And she's like, she gave me one look, and she's just like, "You're an idiot. You know, like, what are you doing? Why aren't you with us? Why aren't you with your family? Why aren't you in the real world?" And I knew from that moment, I'm like, I can't keep using this thing. And I was having fun with it. But about 2 months later, that thing went up on, coincidentally, Facebook Marketplace and was sold for 200 bucks. And I wasted my money buying that thing. So maybe some of you have similar experiences. And by the way, that Oculus headset, it was about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago I did this. It made me very dizzy. You know, I think it was really cool. It was absolutely fascinating. But it really hurt my brain after a couple, 30, 40 minutes of use. I was almost feeling like I was sick. So maybe again, just to kind of relate to what Susan's saying, as an early adopter or an innovator, is it even worthwhile to buy this new tech stuff and adopt things too early? Or is it a waste of money? Some substitutes to that would be either cheaper or better. But yeah, you're right. And there's a lot of decent use. Like for instance, I don't know if this is VR or not, but in the medical industry, what you can do is you can have an American doctor on a VR headset, and that is being simulcasted with somebody else wearing a similar VR headset, where the doctor can see everything within the hospital room, like a surgery room of, say, a more poverty-stricken, disadvantaged community in India, and the highly trained MD here in the US can help guide the surgeon in a different country while he's sitting in his living room at his house. I mean, that's a powerful concept if you really, and it's well done, and you can see things and there's specificity to it. So if you think about the application first, and then you program the technology backwards from the application, that can be a powerful concept. But for a grown man socializing with people in the metaverse on a Friday night who's married with kids, I just, like I said, just to kind of bring some humor into the equation, I was not that tech was not for me. So all right, let's go to the second question. We're actually the first question. So thank you, group two, talking about standards. Fascinating conversation. So group one, what is different about high tech industries where were all industries once high? So were all industries once high tech? Two different questions there. Let's pause there for a second. I mean, some of the most highly paid people, technologically special people, are the people who can come in and save your software, because our software is so very important to us. It's almost more important than our home is being able to protect our data in the cloud and theft and identity theft and all these kinds of things. If a really, really, really good IT specialist, one, can prevent you from ever having that happen to you as an organization, and two, can, if something was to happen, they can come in and fix the problem. How much would you be willing to pay for that? Probably a lot. Be a competitive advantage question. Will I always be needed? Yeah, these tech companies are they're able to raise a lot of money. And one of the reasons why is because we have a lot of money floating out there from investors. And investors having a lot of money is a good thing because they invest it. They invest in new products that allow consumers to then change the way that they live, and hopefully their lifestyle becomes better because of it. They become more wealthy in some sort of way. And they also invest their money into the local economy. They buy food and all this kind of stuff. So having a base, let's just say, of wealthy investors willing to use their money in the space of tech is very beneficial because it fosters innovation. And one of the things we'll talk about today, hopefully, if we have time for it, is it's so important to protect, and we have some government regulation questions, those rights to that innovation. When you have a patent, you have a copyright, you have some sort of intellectual property protection, because if you didn't have that protection, then all of that money that was invested in, say, creating a new drug for the pharmaceutical industry can just be copied and it's flushed down the toilet. It doesn't mean anything. So to be able to have large amounts of money being invested into the future of technology, whether you believe in technology or not, tends to be, from the course of history, it tends to be a decent thing for the, again, a controversial question, for the quality of life and the standards that we live by, because it allows us to flourish and function in a type of way, in many different types of ways. So investment in the community of high tech is a good thing, and there's a lot of it out there. And why is there a lot of it out there? Let me just pause there. Why is there a lot of money chasing tech companies to invest in them? Maybe there's a lot of money chasing it 10 years ago, but now it's a public company, so that the growth is not nearly as high. But to have been an initial investor in Amazon would have been a great decision. But yes, who's the next Amazon is the question. That's the kind of return that these venture capitalists want, that these kinds of investors want. They want a 1,000 times return on their dollar. They're not interested in a 10% return from Amazon stock over the next 6 months, because Amazon is already approaching the maturity phase. And also, I mean, obviously there's a lot of potential there and a lot of growth, but Amazon could very well be dethroned, mark my words, in the next 10 years by some other startup that we don't even know the name of their company today. That's how wild this space is of tech innovation and disruption. But I'll go back to why do investors want to invest in startup tech companies? Obviously, you want to time it perfectly so you get the most value. But then, of course, if you were to sell it for whatever amount of money, essentially some stories about how people passed on purchasing Google for $1 million. I think Yahoo was a part of that or something. And now look at them. So it's tough to foresee and to tell what's going to happen in the future. Is now that you've taken this class and now that we're having this conversation, do you understand the risk in investing in an embryonic stage organization? If you're an investor in tech businesses, you better be able to lose all your money and be okay with it. And that's kind of the point of being an investor to begin with. You don't invest your money into something unless you can afford to invest it, as opposed to saving it. So there's a rule with I think it's the SEC, or some kind of, to be an investor of sorts, to be able to even invest, say, a certain amount of money into an organization. There's a rule that says you have to have at least, it's like 100,000, or it could be $500,000 of net worth. Like, you have to be able to, you're not going to commit suicide if you lose all your money. Essentially, is what it's trying to protect people from making stupid decisions and investing their life savings into some bogus tech that fails, and then their life is destroyed. So we should never do that. We should always, obviously, invest in organizations at a higher level, knowing that if this organization was to fail, and certainly within a tech business, the probability of failure is a lot higher than in the, I don't know, the real estate industry, or the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry is pretty failure prone as well. But I don't know, commodities or precious metals, this kind of stuff. There's a high likelihood that it might fail, and there is a likelihood that you could get 1,000 times back the money that you put in. So that's what's tempting about it. Or how about the bicycle? Or you think the horse and buggy? The horse and buggy, from what I understand, just being able to pull something like a chariot behind a horse is essentially a horse and buggy. That's been around for thousands of years, up until the invention of the car, which the car just became better. Yet a lot of people, even when the car came out, still were good at the horse and buggy. This is an interesting question, and I'll stick to it. I know I got this bicycle image up on the stage, but why would people be hesitant of buying a car when cars first came out, as opposed to sticking to a horse and buggy? And don't just say cost. Why else? Gas stations and what else were very important for cars There were no paved roads. They were
Also
all dirt roads. So what that is, it's called a complementary technology. So you have a car coming out, but because there's no road system or highways, the horse and buggy is really more efficient. It's easier to get around in the backwoods, and they can go over big bumps. And it wasn't. It was more reliable, kind of like what Lady said. So we have to think through that as well, that the timing of it and the infrastructure, is it the right thing for these roads to come out? Remember when we talked about Netflix, and I think it was in this class, well, the reason why Netflix was able to go to streaming is because of fiber. Fiber was now able to create this bandwidth. I mean, if you remember, if you were around, when streaming videos first came out, it would take 15 minutes just to download a 3-minute video. And you would wait 15 minutes and then you'd watch the video. It was like the coolest thing ever because you just received a video from somebody and it was all blurred and distorted and all this kind of stuff. But it was great. But when fiber came out, that all changed. And we were able to download things much, much quicker. And we forget that, right? But the dissemination of that technology was only possible because of other complementary things that were happening at the same time. Interesting. So I put up on this is another question about, was everything first high tech? And I don't know what the book says. I'll read it in a sec. But I think, yeah, I mean, everything, the invention of fire, the invention of cooking with fire, even when you think about medicinal medicines, if you're looking at animals, I think a lot of the ways that as tribes and as groups of people were figuring out, I'm sick, what do I do? They look at how animals interact with their environment and they see that, well, this animal's eating this plant. Maybe this plant is something I should eat too. It could be a medicinal thing. And in a sense, that's technology. Technology isn't just what we think is like digital tech. Tech is just really the creation of new knowledge. And the creation of new knowledge could be a process, could be an idea, could be something, but that knowledge then becomes a form of technology. And so I would think that the answer to that question is, yeah, everything was originally considered like a new tech, whatever that question may be. But I put an image of a bicycle here. Hold on one second, Raphael. If you see what the bicycle was like in 1818, and then you see what the bicycle is like in the mid 70s, how come this 1870 bike with the big wheel, which we've all probably seen pictures of, how come that didn't, standardize? How come we went back to the small wheel? Who knows? So it may have been more efficient, it may have been less efficient. Here's another depiction of it, of just the evolution of a basic bike. And even today, certain bikes, it's 2023 bike. Look at this thing. This is intense. It might look ugly. It's kind of like the Cybertruck concept. But if it works better and then it becomes the standard, then hey, look out, we're going to be all driving cars that look like the Cybertruck. The probabilities around statistics, if you've seen seen the movie Moneyball, has allowed for these high-level data points to predict outcomes a little bit more. And sports betting is now legal and they can tax it. So I'm for legal sports betting. Yet I know that, like, similar to what I said about having a credential of having a net worth of at least $100,000 before you can become a credible investor. I think there should be some rules around gambling in a sense as well. So here's the thing: an entrepreneur or an investor is not a risk taker. And let me bring that apart. I don't meet many investors or entrepreneurs that are like, hey, let's go jump out of a plane, or hey, let's go drive a car 200 miles per hour on the Autobahn. Like, they're not haphazard risk takers. They are something called risk mitigators. They calculate everything they can calculate to make sure when they do take the risk, because eventually they make the decision to take the risk, but it's the risk that is highly probable, or at least to their credentials, of being successful. So the smartest, most successful people aren't accidentally successful. Most likely, they have mitigated as much risk as possible, controlled all the variables that we're able to control, and were willing to make the leap because they believe that the risk is mitigated to the most amount of possible, and then they take the step. And I am like that with my investment. I know that most of the people in my family that are also successful entrepreneurs are also like that. I mean, you ask a successful entrepreneur to go and spend $500 on a fancy dinner, and they'll be hesitant, like, that's a lot of money for me. I prefer the discount over at Golden Corral, because they are frugal with their money, and they didn't get to their success because of that. They're shrewd, and I'm not generalizing, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. They're risk mitigators and not risk takers, is my point. Investing is different than what would be considered getting debt from a bank. One is on an equity side, the other one is obviously on the debt side. Banks are in the business of mitigating risk. Banks are very highly conservative institutions that will only lend to people that are of credit. And all banks want is they're going to take a look at your credit history and your assets to just see, is this person going to pay me back with interest over the course of this loan? It's an equation. They're not allowed to be discriminatory on any other regards. It's highly illegal to be discriminatory in any other way. other than the calculation of, like I just said, creditworthiness, which has to do with your credit score, your payment history of other things you've paid back in the past, your earnings. They look a lot into how much money are you making on a regular basis, and will the ratios add up to you being able to pay this back? And obviously, if you co-sign with somebody else that has earnings, that doubles your chance of getting credit worthiness in a bank. But banking or getting a loan from a bank is not the same as investing in another company. Investing is I have money, excess money that I would like to put into an investment, that I want that investment to pay me back a dividend in return. And this point out too, public companies are public companies. Most, if not all, enterprises. When I say most, if not all, 90% of companies are private organizations that are not available for public investing, and we want it that way. I mean, I don't want anybody investing in my company. I obviously don't want somebody to put their money that I don't know that's going to try to ask me for a return into an entity that I control and operate, and that's a good thing too. So, I mean, companies like Facebook and the origination of Google, that's how they started. And it's why I teach business. One of the main reasons why I teach business, because I understand the value appropriation that is capable of being done through business with hard work, dedication, good ethics, good values, knowledge, and consistency. And if you can do that within an environment that's controlled, like property rights, being able to have contract law, and all the other things that some capitalistic societies are blessed to have, you can put your hard works and your talents and your skills to use to create value in the marketplace and be able to create jobs for other people and be able to have enough money to live. I went to business school with the concept of, when I get out of school, I want to own a business. I never thought through the concept of, when I get out of school, I want to work for somebody else. And this is kind of the concept that I want to foster in a lot of people, is this creating value in your own enterprise is a great thing to do. Ensuring that your enterprise recognizes you for your contributions, very, very important. Yet always keep in mind the possibility of you creating value in an enterprise that you own, you control, and you operate, because I think that is really where you can apply your business knowledge, and take your skill set once developed, your network once developed, and apply it to really create significant value for yourself and your family and your future. And it's possible. It's not easy, and that's kind of why we're talking about the stuff we're talking about tonight. It's not easy, but it's possible. And in the tech business, there's a lot of people trying to do that right now, and there's a lot of people, that are losing a lot of money, and there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money. And those are some of the subjects that we'll talk about tonight. But so this says high technology industries rely heavily on rapid advancing scientific knowledge, whereas other industries' technologies are more stable and evolve slowly and periodically. They're more incremental as opposed to disruptive. This high tech industries are unstable, chaotic, and prone to sudden disruption. Unstable, chaotic, and prone to sudden disruption. People have these personality temperaments. I have a personality temperament that is open to new experience. I enjoy this phrase, chaotic and unstable. I actually would thrive in an environment like that for a short period of time. I don't would be able to sustain it for years and years and years, but for a 6 month period of time, I find it fascinating to see an unstable, chaotic environment and to be able to create structure out of chaos. So that may not be for everyone. The implications for managers are that high tech firms must be extremely innovative, flexible, and forgiving of mistakes. It's huge. Every technology was new at some point. So this is the answer to the second part of the question in human history. Thus, every industry was rapidly evolving and chaotic at some time. Even the wheel, which we looked at, was a new technology about 5,500 years ago. The wheel in ancient Mesopotamia. The, the astonishing new invention underwent several further refinements as it swept the known world and revolutionized transportation. Fascinating. And candidly, if you're a good leader, you take an email like that and you say, fair enough, let's invite this person to the next meeting and let's dialogue about this, because these are the types of conversations that at the strategy formulation level that need to be had in order to maintain a competitive advantage and to develop a sustainable competitive advantage, because this guy is resting on his laurels with his current competencies, his current resources, using them at his current business level strategy, and thinking that that is sufficient in order to lay back and go to Tahiti and sip on margaritas. It's not. And yes, you might have a great position, but we know that within the next couple of years, especially within the tech industry, things will change. Things will get dynamic, and you could very quickly be knocked off of your pedestal and put onto the floor. And in that case, you could be out of business. And that decision that you made to do nothing is a decision within itself. Meaning, if you choose to do nothing, that's a decision. And if somebody like Gavin's avatar that just wrote that email wrote you that message and entered into a dialogue and had some kind of strategy for you, you better listen. Tell me more. What do you think we should do? Especially people at different generations. One of the reasons why I want to sit here for a second, because I want you to think about it. If we're studying strategy and it's a high level course, meaning like a lot of you might not be able to put this into effect immediately within the power positions you have within the organization, but it's important that you know it now for life and applying it to your life, to your team, if you have a small team. But eventually, hopefully, you get to the point where you have more of a formal power within a company to make these decisions. And what you want to be able to do is to create an environment where you have people like this feeling comfortable to speak this kind of way. And it has to do with how you structure your company, how you have chain of command. And a lot of you, I can tell, are a part of companies that are very hierarchical, bureaucratic in a way, position focused. Well, I'm a waiter. I can't tell the chef, that his burger wasn't cooked well. That he would get mad at me. That shouldn't be the case if you're working for a company within a tech industry that is needing to do things in an agile way. It shouldn't be. And how do we create that organization where people feel empowered in a sense because they're incentivized? Maybe they have a position of investment. I talked to a lady named Miriam today, actually. I took my daughter to a swim lesson, and she started a company called Oak Aquatics. And Oak Aquatics is a large swim school where people send their kids. It's in South Florida. Maybe you've heard of it. It's a great program. And she's been in the business for 30 years. And she was a customer of ours at Reef Tropical. We were trying to build some of her pools that she was building. So I've known her for a while. And now I'm taking my kid there. And she has sold her company. It's an ESOP, an employee share partnership, where the employees own 40% of the company. She owns a certain percent, and then the rest is owned by a trust. It's a complicated structure, but the trust is then governed by a board of directors, and she likely sits on the board. But she still is a large shareholder within the company she founded. But she gifted a lot of her shares to her employees because she's an angel that is perfect in every way and she just gives everything away. No, not necessarily. What are some other reasons why you would gift a portion of your company to the employees who are actually running it? What are some incentives to do that? Generational legacy, ensuring quality care of customers, making sure that when they make decisions, when they're on the front lines, that they're decisions with an owner's mindset, that they look to see other people in the company that possibly aren't representing the company well. And instead of having, going and tattletaling on some supervisor, they say it themselves. They say, hey, I'm not sure you treated the customer with a lot of respect there. What's up? Are you having a bad day? And so it's self-governed, which is the way in which communities and organizations, in an ideal way, this is an idealistic way, not in every organization, should be ran self-governed, not governed by some, you know, emperor at the top telling everybody what to do and how to act. I would bet though that McDonald's got slightly better when Chick-fil-A and Starbucks started breathing down their neck. Like just maybe they were influenced by a little bit, and that's the power of creating standards, looking at your competition and seeing what they're doing and trying to mimic some of that. You would think there's a couple businesses just have went. I mean, Party City. Gosh, I can't believe Party City's not around anymore. I think about the Sports Authority, Toys R Us. I mean, I know these are big retailers, but when can I say that? Wow, I went to Party City and I just had a great experience there. And the level of customer service and the innovative nature of their store really made me want to post a Facebook post on how wonderful Party City is. I'm nothing against Party City. I do like Party City, but the point is, they weren't the standard, and unfortunately, and I would think, just to use it as an example, Publix, the grocery store, they do a pretty good job at treating people with a kind of standard that you would hope to expect within a grocery store. And if you go to Publix and then you end up going to a different grocery store and the people are like, please don't talk to me, and you ask them a question, they kind of roll their eyes like, I'm in the middle of something and I don't want to help you. You immediately notice. Why do you immediately notice? Because you had a good experience at a different store because they set the standard. And back to the question, and thank you, Natalie, for putting that out there, is that in order to create that standard, you have to draw those people in. You have to get them to act and feel that they have autonomy. There was a podcast I listened to on Huberman Lab podcast, and the gentleman was a scientist, and he was talking about the theory of happiness. And the one thing for sure that I remember he said about happiness, one was gratitude, and the second was having the concept of autonomy. I mean, it's just self autonomy, being able to make decisions because you want to make them, and that is so important in life to know that you're not being controlled in any kind of way. And we've talked about that, but to have that autonomy and to assert that autonomy in situations and to be respected for your opinion and your thoughts and your mindset is so important. I've been in a multitude of organizations as an employee or as a consultant, and I've simply put my ideas out there. And the ideas I put out there whatever, they're good or not good, but I've seen that they work. And then I've been willing to work hard to help those ideas come to fruition. And in the path of me putting in hours, time, energy, and effort that I thought, wow, this company really wants me to do this, and I can see it's going to make an impact. I was stifled by one or two leaders who were threatened by my diligence or my proactiveness, and they would say things and act in ways of like, "Watch out, this is my territory, and you're causing friction here." And they basically they removed me of my autonomy. And so I immediately in my mind, and this is a character flaw of mine, I just had no desire to work for them anymore. Like they totally stifled my motivation and ambition because they stifled my autonomy. And if you can create your employees to feel that autonomy, to have that participative manner in these high tech companies, to be able to take their talents, bring them to the table, and utilize those talents and foster those talents. You put some guardrails on them, but you, my father would say this crude phrase, and please don't use it against me. He said, "I would rather hold on to the tail of a racehorse than kick the ass of a donkey." Meaning, like the racehorse is running and they're going, and you're like, all right, what are we going to do here? But a donkey's just kind of standing there, like waiting for instructions. Like, okay, what do we do next? And in a high tech industry, in a field that's going to be adaptive and highly innovative, you're going to need racehorses. You're going to need people who are pursuing ideas and pursuing innovations with zeal and with ambition and with passion and doing it well, because they represent a means of excellence. I know we talked about that last class. This is so important because of all the things we talk about in this class. We can go through the core competencies and we can go through the resources and we can go through the industry analysis. This is all fine and dandy. But if we can't create a system for all these things to work well together, then we will. It's not like you can't just duplicate a portion of what Chick-fil-A does and put that into your company and think that your company is going to reap the same benefit that Chick-fil-A has. No, you can't do that, because why? Chick-fil-A has created that and that and that and that and that and that and multiple different things, and how they make it work as a system is what gives them that competitive advantage. Not just one or two things, not just the way they dress, or the way they talk, or the way they train. No, it's 100 different things all happening at once and being governed to happen continuously over and over and over again, and then control to say, is this working? And if it's not working, they're willing to make the changes. So it's creating that system is so very important, and that's what this third question hits at: is do we create a system for people in our organization to speak their mind about the future, to speak their mind about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why they think we should go in a different direction? And do we value their opinion? Do we trust them? And do we respect what they have to say? It depends on the industry. I mean, if you're thinking through an industry in tech and startup, then yeah. But if you're thinking through something like, I worked in the prison system but I was teaching students at Miami-Dade College and Everglades Correctional Institution for 3 years. And I wouldn't want the guards at the prison system operating in this flat hierarchy. No, I want them to have a hierarchy, a vertical hierarchy. I want to know who's in charge, and second in charge, third in charge, fourth in charge. So it depends on the industry, it depends on the context, depends on the goals. But certainly I can answer the question for high tech industries. The answer is yes. You want more of a flat hierarchy. So the 20% rule is an innovation policy at Google that encourages employees to spend up to 20% of their work time 1 day per week on passion projects that are outside their core job responsibilities, as long as those projects have the potential to benefit Google. And some of the reasons behind it is it unlocks intrinsic motivation. It generates innovation from within, early stage exploration before formal investment. And so some of the results of it were Gmail, Google Maps, AdSense, Google News. So it's a highly effective policy. They stole it from 3M. 3M was a company that very similarly, it was a rule about, I think it was maybe a 10% rule, Google upped it to 20%. And what they mentioned specifically is, I want you to work on something, use 10% of your time to work on things that you've never worked on before. So, and 2 years from now, there's some other credential that most of what you're going to work on will be totally different than what you're working on today. So it's not only 10% of your time, but you can't work on certain things that you're currently working on 2 years from now. Like you're constantly changing the things that you're working on. So for all of us that are very comfortable in our routines and comfortable with our, go to work, you check your email, you do these messages, you look at these files, and you send out these messages, and whatever, you pick up the phone, and then you go home, and that's what you've been doing for the last 4 years. That's the opposite of what Google says. I mean, Google says do those things, but then take 10% of your time and go and do something else. I'm going to try to briefly explain this concept of what would be called organizational ambidexterity. So if I'm ambidextrous, I can't pronounce that word right. But if I'll try again. If I am ambidextrous, what can I do with both feet, and be able to do the same thing with my left hand as I can do with my right hand? I could hit a baseball with left-handed. I could hit a baseball right-handed. Hockey, same thing. Tennis, I'm ambidextrous. Either hand, it doesn't matter to me. I think some tennis players actually are this way, and it makes them very tricky opponents, and certainly some baseball players as well. And what this means is an organizational level. So you take it from the individual to the organization. And what we want to create is organizational ambidexterity. And ambidexterity, there's two functions to it. It's exploiting and exploring. So think about left hand and right hand. So exploiting is, if you were going to exploit somebody, you would use them for all the things they're good at. And so when you exploit something within an organization, you make sure you do the things you're currently doing well now. Like you've created some process that seems to be working. Well, exploit that. Use it. Let's put it to work. Let's do it. Okay, so that's exploiting it. Exploring is now we need to find a different process that's totally different than this one that is better. So we have to take time to explore. This is the ambidextrous point to it. How much time do we explore within our company, within our day, within our environment, and how much time do we exploit? We have to do the things we know we're good at. I'm on class with you all between the hours of 5:40 and 9, let's say 8:30 at night. And the point is, I'm doing what I know I need to be doing. I'm teaching you right now. But when I explore, I look for different, unique ways to learn the subject matter, to create stories, to find passionate about these subjects. And I listen to things throughout the day to try to explore new ways of getting you to connect with the material. So if I was to just exploit, I would be teaching this lesson the same exact way I taught the lesson the last 3 times I taught the class. And that would just be what I do forever. That's exploiting. I mean, sometimes it works. Like I still have to stick to the basics. Yet exploring is where the magic happens. And how do I take what I find in my exploring part of it and apply it to my exploiting part of it? And then I start exploiting things a little bit differently. So that's organizational ambidexterity. It's a very important concept when you think about your own life, your own business, is how much time are you spending doing the things you know you do well, doing them, versus looking for ways to improve on those things and applying those things that you're learning along the way. A cool word if you ever want to fancy somebody. Organizational ambidexterity. I don't think we're being ambidextrous here at this organization. If somebody's not valuing your opinion at work, that can be very frustrating. And that's tough. I mean, hopefully that's ways in which you can manage conflict and have those candid conversations and talk about what that means. And I'll speak at a whole nother level. It's like sometimes we have to deal with that because we have to get paid and we have to do what we have to do. Yet in the long run, if we allow that to be the standard of how we operate within a business where people aren't paying attention to our opinions and we're no longer interjecting with our opinions, I'm not sure if that's healthy in the long run. And looking for ways to either change your existing environment or the people within your environment or finding a new environment in the long run might be better for somebody who's not, and I'll just speak in general, who believes that they don't feel like they have the power, authority, respect, whatever, to put their opinions out there or to disagree with people as to why they're doing things and question that why. So shifting gears to the three somewhat controversial topics that maybe we'll have some time to discuss as I pedal through these slides. I want to set those up for you now so you can think about them as we're talking about these slides. So here is the first one. It's about first mover or fast follower. So does being first still matter in tech? The question is this: in a world of rapid imitation and fast moving markets, is being the first mover still a true advantage, or is it better to be fast, better be a fast strategic follower? So that's one that we'll debate in a bit. The second one is, should governments regulate tech standards? The question for debate is, should governments play a stronger role in enforcing technical standards in AI, social media, or digital payments? Or should market forces decide? So that's one. And then here is the last one, if we can get to it. This one's a fun one. Will AI be a job creator or a job killer? The question for debate is, as AI becomes a dominant technological paradigm, will it ultimately create more jobs than it eliminates, or is it a net threat to the workforce? So those are some fun questions. So let's see if I can overview some of the topics before we get there. So technology refers to the body of scientific knowledge. Remember, we're not talking about just high computer aided virtual type of things. It's technology. It's scientific knowledge used in the productions of goods or services. So it could be an idea that is used to make a process better. It could be a scientific paper that I write about how employing people with disabilities adds to the performance of the organization. And people rationally and pragmatically through a quantitative study have found that employing the right people using the right kind of job support and job placement and bringing people in who are autistic or who have certain types of learning disabilities and putting them in a place to succeed actually helps the community, helps the organization, helps a lot of things. If that's done well, that study, and people actually start doing that and then it starts to work, that would be considered a technology. So I want to make sure I'm getting you guys to understand what technology technically is. So high technology, high tech industries are those in which the underlying scientific knowledge that companies in the industry use is rapidly advancing. That's a big concept. So what we know now about Alzheimer's disease and what we will know in 10 years because of certain things happening with Alzheimer's research and certain kinds of tech that people can apply to data sets and all this kind of stuff. This is an industry that is rapidly changing because knowledge is changing all the time. So, from a conceptual level, it's very important you understand that that's what we're talking about is this rapid change because of the advancement of scientific knowledge and not just mouse and iPhone and other kinds of mechanistic devices. That's not what we're talking about. Technology is revolutionizing aspects of the product or production system, even in industries not typically considered high tech. And I love how it says that it's revolutionizing the product and the production system or the production system. So there's a product innovation with technology and a process innovation. I know this is kind of distorted, but this is a core framework when you talk about developing technology. So one of the reasons why the NIH, National Institute for Health, exists is to do something that private companies wouldn't do. They do basic research. Basic research is like understanding how the molecular structure of a shoulder is capable of changing with age, something like that. Whereas no private company is going to do something like that, right? They're not going to invest all this time, energy, and effort into a research study that is questioning how the molecular structure of a shoulder works. But the NIH does it. And the NIH funds basic research because from that knowledge that's created, that basic knowledge of the shoulder and how the shoulder operates, many new things about humans, about the molecular structure of other aspects of our body, about how the body works together can be known so that they can then be commercialized. I know that was a big explanation, but we have to understand that basic knowledge development is the start of technology. And if we don't fundamentally try to see how we can shake up that basic knowledge and advance basic knowledge, then we'll struggle with finding ways to cure cancer and finding things that will benefit the human species. And so, with that basic knowledge, now you have, and we'll run with this example, some fundamental understanding of the molecular structure of the shoulder. And with that fundamental understanding, you have discovered that the shoulder muscle needs to be stretched a certain type of way in the morning and for a certain amount of time, and that will reduce your probability of having a shoulder injury by 90%. So it's like a huge outcome, huge study. It makes perfect sense. If everybody just did it, they wouldn't have a shoulder injury. That's great to know. That's good information to know. Now, what you need to do is you need to find a way to get that information into people's lives so that they start doing it. So the invention is the creation of something. So one of the important things to understand is an idea is fun in your head, but it does nothing until you create an invention and say, voila, my idea has turned into a tangible product right here. Or my idea has been disseminated to somebody else and somebody else is now acting upon my idea. So now you're inventing with that knowledge. That's a big step. That invention is still not innovation. So the invention is fun. I'm really happy you did it. Now, how are you commercializing that? How are you taking that mouse that you created and how are you putting out into the market and what's changing now because of your invention? So now once you have that, you have some fundamental understanding of basic knowledge. You've created something tangible. You understand that there's something we should change. You get that information out there. Now you commercialize it and you have some impact because of it. Now you're creating innovation. Now you're creating change in people's behaviors that hopefully is creating something positive in the world. So that's how technology is developed. And now here on this side, where you talk about the fusion, which is going to lead to the imitation or the adoption of it, is very important. So from the supply side and demand side, it looks different. Demand side is consumers, and how are consumers choosing to adopt your product? There's a ton of like I can scan my body right now, and the body scan is going to tell me my probability of getting certain diseases as I age, and that's awesome. And it happens right now. But will I use it? Is the question. Am I adopting that new technology? Who knows? Another one is people get blood work. And when you get the blood work done, the blood work will tell you from a proactive way, from a nutrition way, what nutrients I'm lacking, which could be contributing to my um, depression or my anxiety or my lack of sleep or my chronic fatigue, whatever I might be suffering from. I get that blood work done and I take certain kinds of supplements or nutrients in order to build my blood the way it should be. So you understand the complexity of that. But are people doing it? Are they using this blood work technology and are they adopting the ways in which this new technology is going on? So that's from the adoption side. The imitation side from the supply chain is here's the other thing: is if that technology is out there, but there are no companies that are actually being built based on that new blood technology, then you won't be able to access it. Meaning, even though you have this awesome ability to read people's blood and tell them whether they're nutrient deficient here or there, I got to fly to Dubai and I got to meet in the corner parking lot with some stranger and he's going to take my blood. I'm not going to do it because it's too risky, even though it's possible. So again, I use the medical industry because I feel like there's a lot of stuff happening right now where certain surgeons have developed new ways of doing surgery that could really cure people. But because other surgeons haven't, imitated that way of doing things, these are some limitations to technology, and that's how diffusion of the technology is constrained. Is it being adopted? Is it being imitated? Are there companies out there providing this, and are consumers using it? Powerful concept, and it's really the premise of a lot of things when it comes to technology. People think the solution, we should be innovative. Like, what does that mean? Being innovative means you have to create a prototype. You have to have an invention of sorts, and then with that invention, it's not good enough. You have to apply entrepreneurial principles to then get that invention adopted by the market. Now you have something. Now you're leveraging innovation. You're not just calling it innovation. Startups, especially tech-based startups, were operating based on this model. And I show you the video, and I apologize for the complexity, but the essence of the video is really the concept of the pivot and the concept of being iterative, being able to adjust and change with launch. You get feedback, you bring that feedback back, you make changes, you launch again, you get some feedback, you bring it back, you make changes. So it's almost like you're taking like a snowball effect as you're slowly but surely building this company based on the feedback. A better example would be if you ever seen this show called Isn't Paint. I don't know if this is a great example, but if you watch the process of them making this cake, it's like they might fail here and they take it apart and they put it back together, and at the end, hopefully it's a good product. But in order to create this unique concept that maybe chefs in general understand this, you're going to go through this phase of possibly having to throw out some burnt French fries. Like you need to try to cook them at a certain temperature. Then you taste it and you say, hey, that doesn't taste good. Let's try a different temperature. So that same concept is what they're applying to these tech companies. They need to do that. And you've probably seen that getting done. Like, for instance, Duolingo does it often. They want feedback. They want you to give them feedback, and they're collecting data from you all the time. How engaged are you, at what times, whatever. So they're going to start feeding you material custom to your engagement level. So that same concept they apply to most tech stuff. And the interesting creation of these tech-based products is that they can do that feedback in real time. When they have a website and it comes up, they can track all these data points. They can put it out there and test it and bring it back and mess on it. I mean, if you were to create a new car, and this is in the beginning of the car industry, and you were to throw out your new car and fail, you're done. You're out of business. It's not like that in technology. It's a little bit easier to iterate. So you have a hypothesis, you experiment with the hypothesis, which is essentially what scientists do anyways, and then you implement. And in the process of this ideation, you're creating ideas, you're looking at business models, you find a new business model, or maybe it's an existing business model that you're just going to use, but you have some new innovative way of doing something. And then you bring it to this, what would be called proof of concept. Is the technology feasible? Is the business sustainable? Is the end user and partner desirable? Like, is this something we want to be a part of? That's when you start working with teams, and then you move that to the market. So then you create value, strategic value, exit value, and option value, the options they have here. So it's the decision of what business model you're gonna do, proof of concept, and then the implementation. And all along this process really is the same essence of creating value within companies. That's why entrepreneurship is defined, the way I just define it, is entrepreneurship is a process of creatively putting together a unique set of resources to exploit in order to create value. So I'll try to say that differently. Entrepreneurship is a process of putting together a unique set of resources to create value. That's what entrepreneurship is. And it's the same thing you're looking at here. How do we put together these resources in a unique way to create value? And doing that over and over and over again within startup companies, and then also within existing firms, is how tech companies operate. So we talked a little bit about these technical standards. What is a technical standard? Another example, the great example was the keyboard. And it seems like Susan is reading the book because that was a good one in the book as well. And she may have just known that. But another one is the shipping industry, how they have these containers. The containers are a standard size. They go on the truck, and even the invention of the container industry is an entrepreneurial task in itself. It's a technology of finding ways to take the containers off the trucks, put them on a ship, and then take them straight up the ship and put them onto another truck. That revolutionized the distribution industry. That didn't happen that long ago. So that's getting sidetracked, but that's a standard. Another standard would be, I mentioned some earlier, like dishwashers, size of dishwashers, the steering wheel, how the steering wheel works. Even like the size of a golf cart, would be somewhat of a standard. And so you get the idea. There's a lot of standards out there. Technical standard, the set of technical specifications that producers adhere to when making a product or component. And then in order to become the standard, in order to take your product and make it the standard, we'll talk about a couple examples in a minute, you engage in something called a format war. And a cool case study, if you feel like reading the book, would be this console wars of being the standard console so that people would use your games, buy your games, essentially. It's a battle to control the source of differentiation and the value that such differentiation can create for the customer as a format war. And there have been a lot of these format wars, and we'll talk about them in the next slide. Dominant design, this is a big one. Common set of features or design characteristics of how something looks. Look at my iPod case. That this might be a standard design that other earbud companies have taken this design, and even the design of a garbage can, the design of a book, the design of a PC, the design of a monitor. I mean, all sorts of ways that it could have been done differently, but one particular design has been adopted. So here are two different examples. One would be the HD DVD versus the Blu-ray DVD. Does anybody know which one won out in the standard, the HD or the Blu-ray?
Blu-ray.
Correct. I remember specifically there was a National Geographic series that came out that was so vivid when the Blu-ray technology came out, and they put it on Blu-ray, and I watched it. I was in college, maybe 2004, 2005, and it was like, oh my gosh, on a HD TV or a Blu-ray TV with a Blu-ray, and it was just these beautiful pictures of these fish and birds, and it was captivating. But at that time, it was still debated as to whether or not Blu-ray was better. And then, of course, you had the HD version of something similar that we didn't know which way to go. And I think you had to buy either the TV or maybe not the TV. It was like LCD with the TV or some other technology. But the DVD player was a Blu-ray DVD player or an HD DVD player. So Blu-ray won out. You say that because in order to set the standard, you have to partner with other companies. So it's a great example of when HD, I think it was Sony, possibly not Sony, another company maybe, that was trying to drive the HD technology. They had to find partners that were willing to also build their technology around the HD concept. So it's not about, hey, I got a great technology when there's another organization out there that's creating a very similar technology, but the components are fundamentally different. So in order for your technology to work, you have to get other people to manufacture their products based on your specifications. That's an interesting concept. And remember, these are like complementers. So if other people don't have the ability to play your DVD, even though your HD technology DVD is wonderful, it'll never get, remember this slide that we went to here, it'll never get the views, it'll never get adopted, and it won't get imitated. Nothing will happen to it because you lost the war. And here's the same. I didn't know this to be the case. I always thought VHS was a mountain within itself. I didn't know that they were competing, but I guess there was a B stands for what, beta? Does anybody remember the VHS versus beta? Jumping ahead, I'm giving some examples of the format where, but yes, you're right. So the beta, I believe, was only capable of recording like an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours worth of film, and they limited it to. I said we're not going to do any more than that. But the VHS was able to record 3 hours worth of film. So people who bought a VHS and say they wanted to like copy a movie onto their VHS, they could only copy one movie where people wanted to have two movies. So that's why one of the reasons why I believe that the VHS went out, because they were willing to adapt and pivot to consumer needs, whereas beta wasn't. And then once that adoption starts happening and you start hitting that late majority of everybody's using this technology, the network effects start building, and you're done. You're in. So how can we relate this to nowadays technology? And I just, the one example that makes the most sense to me is, I know, not for sure, but I'm fairly certain that this interactive AI concept, we have this. So there's a company out there that I listen to some of their content. They support this AI, what are these large language models, called Perplexity. So their tech is called Perplexity, and they're using this content, this influencer, let's just call him that. He's advertising Perplexity as his go-to. So he's doing his little talk show. Every once in a while, he said, let's go to our friend Perplexity and see what the answer is. So there's little sections in the show that is obviously plugging the fact that he's using Perplexity. And I've used ChatGPT now for 3 years since it came out. And from what I understand is it's like getting to know me, and we'll get into this in a bit. And it sort of has all of my chats, it has all of my content. So they're building up something called a switching cost. It's creating more effort because now the OpenAI has my data, and I sort of wanted to have my data, so it doesn't take so long to produce the results that I want. And so if I was to switch to Perplexity, that's a switching cost unless I can port all of my data over. So I'm not going to adopt Perplexity. I'm almost already in on one particular thing. So the industry, my point here is the industry is going to consolidate around a couple players, if not maybe one of these large language models that is just going to be supreme. And that's, we're living in this stage of HD versus Blu-ray or VHS versus beta, but obviously with how tech has grown, there's many different options, and eventually they'll come into one. And social media networks, when social media first became super popular, there was a lot of miscellaneous networks out there that you could use. But if none of your friends were on it, what's the point? All of your friends got on Facebook, you join Facebook. All of your friends got on Instagram, you join Instagram. So this is the point of competing for standard. It's not very easy. That's a whole other powerful concept in itself is being that first mover and creating some of that value from being a first mover. Because without a doubt, first movers like Microsoft or first movers like Ford, they're still winning. If you can create value from being a first mover, and I think there's some examples here that we're going to look at, it can really work out well. Yet all of that product development, all that time, energy, and effort to create that business can just simply be duplicated. And the person who duplicates it or imitates your technology can very well take your place. And so that would be the case, yes, with the VHS, if that's factual, that beta came out first. I think there's a lot of examples like that. Even the MP3 player there was other MP3 players that were being more used until Apple came out with their MP3 player, which took the cake. So dominant design and design is a fascinating topic, and some people may think that I'll try to say it from a scientific perspective. There's philosophy, there's philosophical concepts about beauty and design, and how beauty is intergrained, and it's philosophical, but it's also considered to be well known that beauty is a part of who we are. Like we appreciate beauty, we see beauty, and beauty is important to us. And whether we believe that or not, it's sort of a part of our nature. And in being a part of our nature, design matters, comfortability matters, feeling relaxed in a particular environment, drawn to certain colors, and it works the same way with how we perceive the world around us. And I'm not sure if that beauty transitions over to this Wintel standard. It's how was Microsoft able to design and captivate us through that standard? The Microsoft operating system, the Intel processor, the monitor, the keyboard. I mean, these are things that have created this design component of a PC that we see right here. A personal computer is designed in a way that has these complementars of having a USB, having a TCP or IP, which used to be a modem connection. I don't believe we have those anymore. A CD drive, we don't have that. Having a mouse, having a RAM, slots for connecting peripherals. The way in which our PC is designed became the standard, and Microsoft created that. And the Wintel inside, I think I'm looking at my computer right now. I think it just says Intel inside. But think through this, look at these examples, and see how the design of a PC absolutely was compelling enough to hold it through many, 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 many years. Will it change? Who knows? And certainly Apple, when they came out with their MacBook, took a lot of interest from that PC model. And I think they used to have this personal computer that's on the desk. I remember it, and you could like see in the back all the different components, and it would like light up and stuff, and it was like trying to connect to things. And it was a cool concept, but I don't think it really proliferated through the market. So here are some benefits to standards. It guarantees compatibility between products and their complementers or their complements, reduces confusion in the minds of consumers. That's a big one. Reduces production cost, another big one. So once you become the standard, your consumers understand, this is the way things are, and I know how to use this device, and I get it, and I don't want to have to change. So I'm adopting the standard, and the consumers' minds are changed because of it. And then with that, you're obviously now producing at a high volume. You're not customizing your product, so it reduces production cost, reduces risks associated with supplying complementary products, leads to low cost and differentiation advantages. We should know what those are for individual companies, helps raise the level of industry profitability as a whole. So that's a little bit about that question that Susan asked in the beginning of class, like how do we stay competitive in an environment where the standard is there? But technically, if you're in the space that you're adopting the standard as on the supply side, so you now are an organization that's supplying these products or supplying the service according to the standard, the profitability for you, because somebody else established a standard, is a little bit less because you can just abide by the standard. Kind of like the fast food drive-through. Like the standard is pretty much there. And if you wanted to buy a franchise, a fast food franchise, you don't need to reinvent the standard of how a drive-through window looks, even though that's changing nowadays too. But does somebody have a question? I heard the hand go off. No. Okay, so standards seem to be good. I mean, for the most part, I think they're necessary because, from a consumer's eyes, like, thank you so much for not making my keyboard all wackadoo. I appreciate that. And also from an industry side, from a company side of now that we have a standard, that's cool. But here's the point. If you are in the tech space, you want to create the standard. You want to be the standard because some of this stuff hasn't been created yet. So one of the things that companies are reluctant to do, and Kodak falls into this example, is they'll go to their customers and they'll ask the customer, oh, do you want digital photography? And the customer's like, no, I don't know what digital photography is. I don't want it. I want to go and develop my photos in the photo lab in the dark room, and I want chemicals to get on my hands and smell really bad and it takes 6 hours. But so what? I get to develop my photography. Or hey, I want to go to CVS and I want to, give my film to the lady behind the counter, and I want to come back 3 days later and hope that my pictures are ready. Like that's what I do. Why would I want digital photography? it works perfectly well the way it is now. So that's what customers would say. And therefore Kodak says, okay, well, it's not the reason why they didn't adopt digital, by the way, but it's just one of the reasons why when you go to customers, customers don't necessarily have the answer when it comes to creating these standards, when it comes to creating these new technologies, when it comes to being on the cutting edge. You almost have to condition the customer of what it is that they are going to need. And you have to start catering to those early adopters and hope to cross that chasm as we talked about in the last class. But if innovative companies just simply would listen to customers, then we would still be on the horse and buggy. You know what I mean? Like this is not how it should be done. So it's very tricky. So standards emerge in an industry when the benefits of establishing are recognized. Technical standards are set by cooperatives, or cooperation among businesses through the medium of an industry association. That's a big deal too. One of the things that we worked with in the pool industry was this concept of water clarity and water safety. And water clarity and water safety came with these automation systems. So there was a new standard being adopted at the commercial level where the um, people from the government, I forget the names of the folks that would come and look at our commercial pools. Gosh, I can't believe I don't remember the names of this group of people, but they worked for the government. They would come and they would look at our pool, at our commercial pool, and they would have a list to be able to check off whether or not our pool is safe. What is the name of these? Yeah, but it's a body of politic that is out there for the best interest of the public. And when there's public spaces, these people come out and they say, hey, your space is deemed cleanly, essentially. So in these public pools where mass people would go and swim, they had to have certain kinds of chemistry levels. They would come and inspect our pool. And so the standard was once this concept came out of having automation, which means that you're constantly monitoring the chemicals in this pool, because if God forbid you would dump some chemicals and you would think everything's fine, you would come back the next day and the next thing you know, there's people breaking out in rashes everywhere and people are going to the hospital. That's not a good thing. So they would put these devices into the pools to make sure that the pool's fluorine levels are not too high. And when they became too high, they would alert this company, and the company would then alert the pool company to come out and do it. So that became an adoption. The name of the company was a guy named Alfred Mendoza, is the owner and a friend of mine. The name of the company was CES Technology, Commercial Energy Solutions, I believe is what it stands for. But CES Technology came out with these monitoring systems, and the monitoring systems became the standard. And everybody in the pool industry was cooperative. We understood that it's important that this happened. Also, we understood that this would help us in our job. Like this would make our job easier because we're obviously not liable now for our pool techs making silly decisions. So you get the idea. That's just an example of a cooperation among businesses through the medium of industry associations, where we get together and say, this is the right thing to do. Let's all go ahead and do this. And just because we're competitors, it doesn't really matter. So that's how certain technical standards are also proliferated through the industry. When the government sets standards, they fall into the public domain. So public domain is any company can freely incorporate the knowledge and technology upon which the standard is based into its products. It's a fascinating one. So when the government gets involved, essentially the technology then becomes public. Why? Because our tax dollars pay the government, and the government is using their resources to go and set standards, and therefore those standards are now public use. Standards are now public property. I don't know if this relates, but I had a company. I created a company called My Water IQ. And it was an awesome business because what we were capable of doing is we were capable of looking at people's personal water meters. And they came out. So we work in Ocean Reef and all these other places where people would have second, third homes. So wealthy people that they would have these homes and they would leave their home for months at a time. And when they leave their home, they still have liability where they could leave a toilet running. They'd have people come and stay at their house. They'd rent their house. They'd use their house. And they would leave the house. And the next thing you know, they would have a water issue. There was some leak in their house. Toilet's running. Something's leaking. And when we read the water meters, we'd have to go out and physically check the water meter and see, okay, yesterday the meter was at 8,000. Now today it's at like 10,000, but nobody's here. Like, why do we use 2,000 gallons of water in a single day and nobody's here? Okay, there's something wrong here. So we go and call the customer and say, hey, there's something wrong. Do we mind if we go in your house, check the toilets, whatever? And that was a huge advantage for us because we were helping the customers. So this government body came in and started installing these tech devices, these communication devices as towers that were automatically reading these water meters digitally. And so they'd set them up all throughout this place. And then I took that information. Now it's public information. Like that, this is something that I wanted access to. So I built a software around reading that data just for my customers. And when my customers had a variance, I was able to alert them automatically by building this software and setting in these automatic alerts. And it was very fascinating. But that technology I incorporated into our service company of Reef Tropical, so that all of our customers, we would ensure that if they had a water variance, they would receive an alert. And if it certainly you'd want that if you weren't home. Like, why is there water being used at my house? You dispatch a property manager, or you call us and we go out there and take care of it. So that is just an example. The water meter technology that the government put in place, they now gave the private businesses access to that technology. And most, again, public domain things, you should have the right to walk into your county municipality, right into the office and say, hey, I'm here and this is what I want and I'd like access to this information, and they should give it to you. Some of you, being involved in civic duties, you should know that. They work for you in a sense. So network effects, positive feedback, and lockout. This is a fun one. We talked about network effects. We're not going to talk about it again because we understand the importance of network effects. But here's a cool visual that gets you to understand it a little bit more. It's called a positive feedback cycle. This is what we're looking for from indirect network effects. So let's start over here to the left. The availability of complementary goods attracts users, increasing the installed base. So complementary goods, roads for cars, the iPhone, some other good examples of complementary goods. I had them pulled up here. Um, the iPhone has the headphones. The iPhone has the, whatever the cases. Remember when iPhone came out? There's these OtterBox cases so you don't want them to drop or get wet or something like that. So that's a complementary product that would obviously increase the sale of iPhones because they were able to provide some of these cases. These are additional products or services that increase the value of the core product. The more complements available, the more attractive the core product becomes. So the availability of complementary goods attracts users, increasing the install base. A couple of examples are app store apps complement the iPhone. More apps, more phone. Okay, so this is an interesting example, and maybe you guys know this one. There's an app in China, something like that. Let's call it Wi-Fi. So the app in and of itself, you could pay for your parking, you could pay your bills with your bank, you could hail an Uber, you could sign into your class, like just in the one app itself, it has everything you need. Some other examples of complements would be for like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. These are streaming services, but they're complements for smart TVs and Roku devices. I won't eat a peanut butter sandwich without jelly. So absolutely, jelly is a complement to my peanut butter and bread. The better jelly is doing in the world, the more peanut butter sales there will be. So a good one. Electric vehicle charging stations complement EVs like Tesla. There's another one. Smart home devices, lights, and thermostats complements to Amazon Alexa and Google Home. You get the idea. The more smart devices people have, the more people will use Amazon Alexa and Google Home. So there are some examples of the availability of complementary goods attract users, increasing the install base. Then the size of the install base increases. A large install base attracts products of complementary goods, and the availability of complementary goods increases. You see this positive feedback loop. And you can just see with the App Store when they sort of democratize the ability to create apps in the App Store and open that up for entrepreneurs, it changed the game. Companies promoting alternative standards can become locked out of the market when consumers are willing to bear the switching costs related to abandon the established standard and adopt a new standard. So that's a one we'll pause on for now because switching costs is a big concept. So killer applications. This is a fun one. I gotta read up this. So what is a killer application? Applications or uses of a new technology or product so compelling that customers adopt them in droves, killing competing formats. I'll give you some examples. Microsoft Excel and Word. Halo, the video game, was used as people bought Xbox not because they loved the Xbox. They bought it because they loved Halo. It was a game that changed the way that people used games, and they used that collaborative play there too. Instagram for your iPhone, WhatsApp in the early years of WhatsApp, Google Maps really is a killer app, and so this helps. These killer apps really help when people just start going there. So strategies for dominance: make network effects work in one favor and against competitors, in one's favor and against competitors. Build the install base for the standard as rapidly as possible. That's very important. Ensure a supply of complements. These are ways in which to get your dominance in the standard and win this thing we call the format war. You want to create this positive feedback loop. It's very, very hard to do. So one of the things that we've talked about in the past is the razor and blade strategy, pricing the product low to stimulate demand and pricing complements high. And the ink cartridge printer, low price to get a printer, but you buy the ink cartridges are $50 a bag, and there's like 2 of them in the bag. So that's another example. And of course, the consoles, the gaming consoles, you got to keep them reasonably priced. But then the games you can price for 75, $80, and you make most of your margin on the games. You can cooperate with competitors, and you can license. We talked about the company IBM and how they license a lot of their patents. Comparative economic. Okay, so let's get to the first question. And I'm going to set a timer at 5 minutes, but hopefully we can engage. And I'll ask Susan. I know if Susan and Raphael did not participate, because I know you guys are very good at talking. We've heard a decent amount from you guys tonight already, but I want other people, this is your opportunity to participate, at least shout out your opinion here. Here's the question. Should governments regulate tech standards? Question for debate. Should governments play a stronger role in enforcing technical standards in AI, social media, or digital payments? Or should the opposite here, or should market forces decide? You have two options. I say government should play a stronger role, yes, or no, government shouldn't play a stronger role and they should allow market forces to decide. What are your thoughts? To see where the government is currently playing a role in tech standards. It says the USB-C standard, the European Union, there's a regulator there that what it did, so mandated USB-C as the universal charging port for smartphones. That's one example. It's in Europe. AI safety and transparency. This is global. A lot of examples here, US and EU. US executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI was signed in 2023, sets standards for testing, watermarking, and model transparency. And so data privacy, GDPR and beyond. GDPR stands for. The regulated European Union, the Law of General Data Protection Regulation, that's it. What it regulates how companies collect, store, and use personal data. Another one is net neutrality. US, India, and EU regulation requires internet service providers to treat all traffic equally. Why it matters, prevents ISPs from favoring certain platforms or formats. And then, of course, cybersecurity standards for critical infrastructure, regulator US, CISA, NIST, global equivalents. What's regulated standards for software security, supply chain integrity, and data protection in utilities, telecom, and finance. So there are just some examples for you. And then, of course, you have this free market concept where usually what happens in the free market is the most value is created with perfect competition. I mean, you allow the market to decide, the consumers decide. But I just got done telling you that sometimes consumers don't know what they don't know. And sometimes people smarter and more experienced than them have to get ahead of these poor decisions that consumers could be making and prevent them from making those decisions and destroying their lives. So it's an interesting concept. And I know this is kind of away from this topic, but it's important to understand that as a purely capitalistic society, the US is not purely capitalistic. We run a mixed economy. There's a socialist component and a capitalistic component. And what I mean by that, obviously, we're basis. Our constitution is based on creating independence and having individuality. And capitalism tends to be the dominant force, and there's a lot of good in it. Yet we do have a large welfare system. We have a lot of social benefits. We have social security. We take care of our elderly. There's a lot of things we do that really is really a premise in what societies that are more socialist do. So it's not as if the government doesn't currently play a role in making decisions in the market. And it could be good, it could be bad. Depends on how you look at things. Okay, good one. Let's see if we can get to another question so that we can. That was good. I appreciate everybody who took that talk there. So we'll get to the next question in a second. The first mover advantage versus the first mover disadvantage. This is an important one to understand. Should I be somebody who decides to go first and put all this energy, effort, and do the product development, and why not? And maybe we'll have some examples we can talk about with that. But there are advantages and there are disadvantages. And one of the things that we looked at last class was this whole early adopters, the first movers, I think we call them innovators, and then we call them first movers. And then there was like the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards, I believe is how it's done. And that means that somebody is going to have to go first and discover whether or not this technology works. If you think about it from an organizational perspective, I tend to be more along the lines I think Gavin mentioned, a little bit more conservative with the types of things I want to put a bunch of my money into or the businesses that I want to create. I want to know that it works before I start putting my time, energy, and effort into it. So that wouldn't be a first mover. It would be like a second or third mover. So the first mover is a firm that pioneers a particular product category or feature by being the first to offer it in the market. Creation of a revolutionary product results in a monopoly position. First mover advantage, pioneering new technologies and products that lead to a competitive advantage, slowing the rate of imitation. So if you can build up your resources, build up your technology, build up your learning advantages, the learning curve that we had, and build your team and build your brand, it's going to be a lot harder for competitors to come in and compete against you because you already have staked a position in the game. And so that's very helpful. But there's also disadvantages, competitive disadvantages associated with being first. So the question, and let me see if I can get some advantages, So here are some examples of first movers that did well. Amazon is a first mover that did really well in e-commerce and cloud technology. Tesla, first mover advantage. Netflix streaming, first mover advantage. So some of the ones that have failed, classic one is MySpace for social media. They made a mistake. It said the first mover mistake had early dominance but failed to innovate and manage user experience. Yahoo had first mover advantage in search and portals, but their mistake was they started strong but failed to capitalize on search and mobile early. And then, of course, BlackBerry and smartphones, first mover mistake dominated corporate mobile but missed the touchscreen paradigm. So here's, I mean, the question is, what do successful first movers have in common? What could failing first movers have done differently? But the question we're going to ask here is, in a world of rapid imitation and fast moving markets, is being the first mover still a true advantage? Or is it better to go second, fast follower? These funny movies or shows or even cartoons where the road runner would tell the coyote, "Oh, you go first." The coyote would like fall off the cliff, and the road runner would jump right over it because the coyote fell face first in the mud or sunk in the quicksand. And then, of course, the second person to go sees the trap and doesn't fall in it. And I think that if you can picture that in your mind, I think that's why a lot of people wait to see if somebody's going to fall on their face and then just avoid that mistake. And that's obviously a strategy. But then, of course, you could very well fall on your face and still get back up and learn and not fall in the quicksand later on. And so you can play that analogy out over and over again. But I think that there's a boldness to going first. I do believe, as you know, in these learning effects. And I think that the learning effects and the tacit knowledge that you establish by doing that iterative startup and figuring out if there's market demand, getting out of the building, interviewing customers and finding a product, building a product, launching a product. There's a lot of learning in that really, if you can keep that learning effect competency in your organization as a first mover, that's a powerful concept. One thing before I forget about it, the we're going to talk about Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and we're talking about the value of patenting your technology. Yet Coca-Cola does not patent their formula for Coca-Cola; it's a trade secret. And the reason why they don't patent it is because if you patent it, you have to describe everything to the patent team, the patent office, and that stuff can leak. So, and we can talk about leaking information and putting things in writing. Think about what you put in writing before you put it in writing, and what's happening with technology nowadays. That once you put stuff out in the universe, it's kind of like catching my tongue before I say something impulsive to, if I'm angry that my wife bought the chocolate chip waffles as opposed to the other waffles in my mind, I'm like, gosh, she never buys the right waffles. If I say that out loud, that's not a very smart thing to say. And so the point is, what is the point there? The point is we have to be careful with the information we put out there when we have a competitive advantage because our competitors could very quickly pick up on it. And if you're more strategic, if you're the first mover, if you have a formula, if you have a competitive advantage, don't share it with the rest of the world. It could be a good strategy. Some people buy that, some people don't. Okay, pros and cons, first movers. Advantages: opportunity to exploit network effects and positive feedback loops. Yay, that's fun. We learned about that. Ability to establish brand loyalty, ability to increase sales volume ahead of rivals, ability to create switching costs for customers. So we'll talk about that in a bit, but switching costs is a big deal. Can accumulate knowledge. And I just articulated that with my learning effects. Disadvantages: very significant pioneering costs to find this new technology, more prone to making mistakes, risk of building the wrong resources and capabilities. That's a fascinating one. Risk of investing in inferior or obsolete technology. So there really would be no Netflix without Blockbuster, in a sense. There would have been no Redbox without Blockbuster. So Blockbuster pioneered the rental movie industry. There was a company called West Coast Video when I was growing up, and I loved it. And then it was a couple years, I remember it well. But then, of course, Blockbuster came in, and like they were the new company in town. And ever since then, it was Blockbuster. So they pioneered, but of course, they fell into the victim role of making these mistakes, and they didn't invest in the right technology. It became obsolete. So here is the last question, and then we'll be done. But let me talk about these paradigm shifts. One of the things I want you to perk up on it, and I pump myself up before I say stuff like this because I don't want this class to just be I'm here talking and it's a lecture. I really want this to be impactful for you and the decisions you make in your life. I think that's very important to me. Hopefully, you can see that. And there's something called a paradigm shift in the way in which we operate in our systems, in our organizations, in our colleges and universities. A lot of these paradigm shifts, we've probably seen them from a social context, but also from a technological concepts post COVID or during COVID. And these paradigm shifts now become acclimated into how we do things. So I ask you to really consider this question: does 10 years from now look like it is today? And if you're in control of resources, in the future, do you expect more change or less change? These resources that you have now, how can you use them to both exploit what you're doing now and also explore what you have in the future? Because paradigm shifts are coming. And if you can notice these trends around you, and be ready to embrace some of them. Also, maybe stand firm against some of them that you don't believe to be of value, or maybe you have a moral grounding in something. One of the fascinating reasons why, again, I restate the we're trying to talk about value appropriation. We care about shareholder value as opposed to the stakeholder value, is because it brings us into this battlegrounds of, hey, guess what? I'm really happy that you think AI is not good for the world and that it's going to be very hard for people to work. But guess what? You, unfortunately, as wonderful as you may be, you don't have control on what's happening in the bigger picture. It's going to have, you can't stop it. I mean, that's tough to say. Maybe you're the Terminator and you can stop it. I don't know. Or maybe you're going to create it. But the point is, things are happening. It's not about whether or not we want to stop them from happening. It's how do we respond to it? How do we utilize it? How do we either use it as a tool, or what else are we going to use? How do we fit into this paradigm shift? So technological paradigm shifts are shifts in new technologies that revolutionize the structure of an industry, dramatically alter the nature of competition, require companies to adopt new strategies for survival. These are big things that are going to happen in your lifetime. If you're graduating from college right now and you're planning on working for the next 30 years, you're going to see things. You're going to see giants walk the earth again. Put it that way, in some mysterious mythological way. But this is the truth. Robots. I mean, my new Roomba is doing crazy work around my house. And I'm so grateful I have it because it mops. I have 3 kids. I'm so grateful for my Roomba. Occur in industries when established technology is approaching or is at its natural limit. New disruptive technology has entered the marketplace and is invading the main market. We're talking about tech companies tonight. We're talking about the strategies that they use and deploy that are a little bit different than typical businesses because of the nature of the embryonic phase. We haven't gotten to the point yet where we start talking about how do you organize your structure and how do you set up your culture to respond to some of these things. But we talked enough about that in the beginning of class so that you understand. The last question for debate tonight, and I'd love to hear some of you chime in. I think we have seconds or less. Will AI be a job creator or job killer? Question for debate. As AI, artificial intelligence in many different forms, becomes a dominant technology paradigm, it is becoming, and it will become a dominant, it already has become a dominant technological paradigm. Will it ultimately create more jobs than it eliminates? So it's a net positive for jobs. Or is it a net threat to the workforce? To produce about this debate, like, is AI in the last 5 years, has it been destroying more jobs than it's been creating? And here are the results, and then we'll be done because it's 9 o'clock. So thanks for bearing with me. So AI job opening surge. So AI related job postings in the US grew 21% from 2018 to mid 2024. So that's just AI related job postings. But globally, PricewaterhouseCoopers forecasts AI could generate 170 million new jobs by 2030. The World Economic Forum estimated net creation of 58 million jobs, 133 million created versus 75 million displaced. So in a sense, the people who are sort of focusing on this with the research are saying, yeah, there will be job displacements, but there will be more job creation than displacements. So currently, about 14% of US workers report some job displacement due to AI. That's just self-reporting. Roughly 13.7% say they've lost jobs because of robots or AI. In 2025 alone, 77,000, say 78,000 tech sector jobs have been cut due to AI-related layoffs. So what's the general key takeaway? AI isn't leading to widespread job losses as currently right now, but may limit wage growth. And the former VP of Microsoft says, don't panic. AI brings new opportunity and reskilling flexibility. So let's be grateful that we're talking about it and that we're engaged in conversation, that we're doing it on Zoom. And I want to say thank you for your attention tonight. Hopefully it was fascinating for you. I certainly enjoy my classes. And
it's inspirational.
I hope when you reflect on some of these leaders that one might consider to be heroes and think about their lives,